Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Bellavita. I'll be your moderator for today's show, and today's topic will be violence in America. And this is something that we apparently neither party discusses very much about, and probably because the statistics just aren't very good and solutions aren't looked at. Now, one of the bad ones that I'm looking at, which is a statistic, is in Spain, where I'm moving to in September. Asturias, which is northern Spain, has murder by gun, just like every other country does. It's actually an autonomous part of Spain. It has several million people in population, and Gijon, which is their capital, 250,000 people, had one murder by gun, and that was in 2021. That was it, 2021. There has been none the last several years. The country of Spain has murder by gun also. Last year, in 2023, there were 50 in the whole country. And the United States of America, there was over 20,000. So with that, just as a start, and no matter how you look at the statistics, it looks really bad. And that's just one country. Morocco's safer. You can just go on and on. We have Houston, we have a problem here that's not being addressed. So with that, we're going to bring somebody who can address the issue. He's the former Comptroller General of the United States of America. And yes, violence does affect the economy. We're going to bring in the Honorable David M. Walker to discuss violence. What a timely topic to discuss.
It's particularly timely when you think about the fact that there was an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump just within the last couple of days, and but for a few millimeters, he wouldn't be with us anymore. And, we ought to talk about that at some point. There are fundamental differences between countries with regard to the makeup of society, with regard to gun laws. We have in the United States something called the Second Amendment, which means that, there's a right to bear arms. There are some restrictions on that right for people who are, for example, convicted felons and others. There are many countries, and I don't know what Spain's laws are. Maybe you do, Nick, that has severe limitations on who can even have a gun, and that's a subject of continuing debate about how expansive should the Second Amendment be. Should it apply to guns that have large ammunition capacity? Should it apply to semi-automatic weapons? Clearly, it doesn't apply to automatic weapons; those are not allowed. Clearly, it doesn't apply to missiles and artillery and other things that are weapons, but are clearly not deemed to be personal weapons, if you will. Violence is a problem in the United States, but you have to lift the hood and look underneath, and not just look at metrics overall. You have to be able to find out where is it a problem. It tends to be a problem much more in major cities. It tends to be a problem much more in certain portions of those major cities. It tends to be a problem much more in certain segments of the population, demographically, if you will. And the number one form of gun violence is with a handgun, because the handgun's the easiest to get, it's the easiest to transport, it's the easiest to conceal. The event that we had within the last couple of days with former President Trump was with a long rifle. Those are a lot more difficult to be able to conceal. And again, I'd like to be able to come back to that at some point. But candidly, I'll also tell you that one of the reasons that the United States will never be defeated by a foreign invader, forget about our nuclear weapons, forget about any other weapons that we have that are weapons of mass destruction. The Second Amendment means that a vast majority of the American population have some type of arms available to them. And anybody who tried to invade the United States with an armed force would be met by universal resistance from people of all ages, all over the country. Just look at the movie Red Dawn, and you'll get a sense of what that's all about. In the meantime, it's tragic. Anytime there's a loss of life, frankly, we can't forget about the loss of life associated with illegal drugs. We have about an estimated 100,000 people who have died from fentanyl overdoses a year. And we need to be doing a lot more with regard to that as well, which has to do in part with our open southern border. So I'm happy to go from here.
Okay, then what we're going to do, by the way, that's another statistic that apparently the politicians don't deal with. I love it. They don't deal with any of the tough issues. The national debt, 100,000 people dying of overdose, and they don't deal with violence in America. Instead, all I do is hear rhetoric and no solutions. So we're going to try to bring in some people that may have some solutions from our panel. We're bringing Rick Grosner of the High IQ Society, Mega Society in Los Angeles, Kim Calhoun, president of the Pod TV network, Mark Lee, who's one of our producers, and Shaquille Latmer, who is in down under in Australia, which they don't have gun problems there as they do here. So with that,
let's also understand the difference in the gun laws, though. Okay, it's not just a societal issue; it's also who can have guns and under what circumstances.
Right. Well, let's go to our Aussie friend and find out why is it that Australia you guys don't have like 20,000 murders a year by gun? What's the reason?
Yeah, and look, we actually do have, I think, more permissive gun laws than what the international community probably thinks that we have. But yeah, it's not as permissive as it used to be. We had a massacre in Port Arthur, and after that there were gun law restrictions. So when I was in school, we had a gun range at our school, and then after that, obviously, we weren't allowed to do that anymore. I think our attitudes are different as well. I'm not sure what it is in the United States, of course, that you guys have such a rate of violence, because there is other countries that have similar or even greater per capita numbers of guns that don't experience this level of violence. So I think that's very, very sad to see. So.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I did check the statistics that are worse. They're all in the Americas. In other words, if you want to go to a worse place than America, go to South America or Central America. You want to do well and get away from violence, go to Europe, and actually go to Asia. But we'll bring in our High IQ Society person.
But New Zealand's such a peaceful, sorry, if I can just say one other thing, New Zealand's a very, very peaceful country. And that terrible tragedy that happened in Christchurch, after they'd already gone through earthquakes, they'd already gone through all this other stuff, the volcano that went off, they just had such a terrible time. That was an Australian guy. I'm not going to name him because I don't like naming people like that, but he was an Australian guy who went over to New Zealand because he was able to access weapons that he couldn't get in Australia. And he killed, I think it was 50 or 51 people or something. So, it's always sad when we see that, but it seems like you get mass shootings every other week in the United States, which you're just not used to seeing elsewhere.
Let me throw a bunch of numbers at you. About 100 gun deaths in the U.S. a day. About half of those are suicides. 450 million guns in America, which is about 1 3/4 guns for every adult American. In less than 5 years, it'll be 2 guns for every adult American. However, only 1/3 of American households are gun-owning households, and the average gun-owning household owns 8 guns. So we got a ton of guns out there, and they're not going away. We went from 0 semi-auto rifles in the 60s to several tens of millions AR-15s, AK-47s today.
Okay.
Hey,
Yeah, Mark.
Hey, David, I just wanted to push back on something you said slightly and everything, and maybe you agree, maybe you won't agree and everything, because you talked about the gun violence and it being very much of a urban issue. And yes, I would say there's a lot of gun violence in the urban areas, but I can tell you that right here in North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina isn't exactly the biggest city in the world. Charlotte is much bigger, and even our city next to us, the state capital, and we've been dealing with gun violence now for about a year or two, and our mayor is definitely focusing on that quite a bit. And where my mom lives at, which is a country kind of like, I guess technically Rocky Mount is considered to be a city, but if it is, it's a very small city, and they've been having a tremendous amount of gun violence as well. So it does seem like the gun violence has spread not just in the urban area and all along those lines. And I was just also wondering, because we were talking about it on the other show, your thoughts around these kind of like how people are very much passionate, whether it's around politics or whether it's around sports or a number of other things. Because the other thing that happened before the president's assassination attempt and everything was that if you follow soccer, there was the Copa games that were going between Miami and Charlotte. There might have been one other city, but in the Uruguay game, the Uruguay fans got mad because the Uruguay players got mad because their family and friends they felt were being harassed. So they actually ran into the stands. It was literally a brawl. I think that took place the day before this assassination attempt. So it seems like people are quicker to temper and all along those lines. So I just wanted your thoughts on both of those.
Well, you have to drill down on the numbers, okay? I mean, clearly we have a problem in the United States. There's no question about it. It's not confined solely to the major cities, but it's clearly a bigger issue in the major cities. As was mentioned by Rick, half of gun deaths are due to suicide. You can't put those in the same category as murders, if you will. I mean, all deaths are tragic. With regard to soccer, which the world calls football, international football, those are like non-violent wars. Okay, I mean, this is how these countries battle each other, if you will, and emotions get very, very high. Normally, they don't involve weapons. Normally, it's just brawls, and there's also been some stampedes, if you recall. People have died, because of stampedes that have taken place, at some of these soccer games or international football games, if you will. Look, we do have a gun problem, but I can assure you that the Second Amendment is not going to be repealed. It may end up being narrowed in some way, all right? And maybe we ought to think about, there are things that ought to be done. There ought to be universal background checks, absolutely, positively. In my view, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun unless you're at least 21 years old, all right? There's a lot of places you can buy them for that. In my view, there ought to be a limit on how many bullets should be able to be in a magazine. And so there are things that I think that we can and should do to try to make things better. But I do think that we ought to transition a little bit to what happened with regard to the attempted assassination on President Trump, because it relates to some of the challenges that we have that you mentioned, the societal challenges.
Right.
But for a few millimeters, former President Trump would be dead. And I've seen schematics that have been provided that if he had not moved his head at the last second, for whatever reason, divine inspiration, whatever, I don't know, for whatever reason, he would not be with us today. It was a matter of millimeters, okay? And it's really tragic that fireman was killed because the bullets went, past him or grazed him and killed that fireman, injured two others, if you will. But then you have to ask, why? One of the things that's been going on in our country, which is totally unacceptable, is that people are starting to demonize the opposition.
Exactly.
It's one thing to have different views about policy, different views about persons. It's another thing to demonize the opposition and to call the opposition names like, Hitler, it's gotten way, way, way out of control. All right. And what we need to do is that we need to focus more on the future and on policy rather than the past and personalities. And, I will tell you that with, I'm somewhat active on social media. Somebody who I don't really know, who was a friend on social media, posted something after this happened that was just way beyond reason. Like, well, how come this guy didn't have better aim or something like that? I immediately unfriended him and chastised him. I mean, that is totally unacceptable, right? And the other thing I'll say to you is that the head of the Secret Service should immediately be fired.
Thank you. Thank you.
The head, whoever was in charge of screening for security should immediately be fired. And then there should be an investigation of whether anybody else should, including the local police department, right? I mean, the idea that you would allow somebody on a roof within 150 yards of a former president of the United States is unacceptable and unbelievable. Where were the drones? Where were the choppers? Where, they should have had somebody positioned on the roof. It is outrageous. I hope that what can happen now is that both sides will kind of tune down the rhetoric, and that we'll start focusing on the future and policies rather than the past and personalities. That's what we need. And that's what a healthy.
Dave,
I would like to thank David for saying that, because that was the first words out of my mouth. I worked with NCS4 and their labs, and so I understand the security measures that are generally put into place. I've been in buildings where they have swept and cleared for presidents and high profile people. So I know what goes in and is involved, and you never leave a roof. That was an open roof. But this is what I said: a 20-year-old kid outsmarted the Secret Service, the police department, private security, hundreds and hundreds of security people, managed to bring in a rifle. And I looked at videos of people that were in the vicinity. It wasn't so far away that there weren't crowds around that building. And I have a video of a man who literally looked up and said, "Hey, there's a man with a gun on the roof. People, there is a gun, a man with a man." And he was yelling and screaming. He has it on his phone. "There's a man with a gun on the roof, somebody." And then I guess the kid panicked, and that's when he started shooting, was precisely at that moment, because I compared videos with gunshots to see. And so, but they spend hours and hours screening people before they come into a facility like this. Women are generally not even allowed to bring in purses. So I agreed with you, David. That was the first words out of my mouth, was as I would fire the whole security team, not just the head. I would fire.
I wouldn't do that. But, this administration is not very good at accountability. I mean, but we'll see what happens. In addition to that, I happened to have the opportunity to meet RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy, within the last several days when I was out for Freedom Fest and speaking out at Freedom Fest. He spoke there too. He should have security too. I mean, he should have had a long time ago, but given what's going on right now, he should have security too. Trump should have beefed up security. And we'll see what happens. I mean, actions speak louder than words. We heard some words from various players, including the president last night. But what matters is actions, not just with regard to provide additional security, but to hold people accountable for failure.
Would you put that across the
board? I want to add one more thing that I read the DA from that town stated, and it really offended me as a person of the United States, or embarrassed me. But he said, maybe we've become a little lackadaisical with our security. Yet, you make people believe that you're on top of everything, and make us go through all of these measures to give us false illusions that we're being protected, and you're being lackadaisical. You know what? A professional security should be on every rooftop around a program like that.
Kim, just along those lines, this is actually for David, just really quickly, another question that I had for him. Because I remember, like I said, I've done nothing as big as that, but I have done events like street festivals and everything. I remember that we used to have to go through training in order to be prepared for any contingency that may happen, and that was security training. It doesn't matter whether you were a low level part of the event planning or the higher end, and I was like probably middle to high end and everything along those lines. But I'm wondering, to Kim's point, if they are still doing that kind of training, because I do think that maybe we got a little lackadaisical, because I can tell you, like our street festivals, you had to get some training in terms of how to handle emergency situations, and I'm not sure that it is as much out there as it used to be, because I remember going through that like even before the pandemic and everything. So is that a issue, Dave?
Well, let's hope that they are doing that, but let's understand a few things. Okay, one, this person was outside the perimeter. Okay, so they weren't subject to any screening or anything else. Anybody that got into the perimeter had to go through screening. Kimberly referred to that before. It is standard operating procedure to be able to have somebody on the roofs of buildings that are within the distance of being able to get a shot off. Okay, that's standard operating procedure
And line of sight. And line of sight.
That's right. Standard operating procedure.
I know these.
They failed that. Okay, even though it was out of the perimeter, right? Because guns can shoot a pretty good way. 150 meters on an AR-15. 150 yards. Okay, meters are a little higher. Not difficult. Should have been there. All right, and so I want to see some people held accountable.
I agree.
Yeah.
So can I
I
just say
agree
though,
100%.
Shaquille.
yeah, if I could just say, look, firstly, yeah, I think it's really important that Americans learn to be able to talk to each other, especially when they don't agree with each other, because you learn a lot of things. I passionately don't agree with the inheritance tax, but I would never want to hurt David and Walker for having a different view to me. I just think it's a great thing to talk about and learn from. Just in relation to the security, I think when you go back and look at things, you can always look at all these different mistakes that are made. Clearly, there were mistakes made here. Some people say, well, he should have had more security, it was denied to him, and all these different things. With your comments about RFK, just on principle, given what the Kennedy family's already been through, he should have some pretty serious security, in my personal opinion. But one of the things that I've actually been quite disturbed to see, and to be honest with you, it's been coming from the right or the centre right, is, well, the head of Secret Service is a woman, and she was tasked with increasing the amount of women in the Secret Service to 30%. And there were these women that were part of his team. And so this is what happens when you get DEI hires. I think that that's completely unnecessary. And I don't think that the incompetence or the mistakes that were made because of the inclusion of women into these roles. So I think that rather than just wanting to fire everybody right now, I think that there should be a lot of discussion about what actually occurred here. Why didn't the drones see them? I've heard a report, Kimberly, that the police officer came up onto the roof and he then turned the rifle on him. The police officer moved down. Something like that happening should have immediately had Trump brought off the stage. There's some sort of breakdown there. I don't know whether it's communications or what happened, but you're absolutely right. The other thing I will just say in credit or in defense of the security services is, if you've got a big crowd, somebody pointing and yelling out the distance may not necessarily get your attention. You may not necessarily see what they're looking at and what they're pointing at. So yes, clearly mistakes made, but I think we just need to let an investigation happen before we start.
Thank you, Shaquille. Let me clarify what I said, and I stand by it 110%. The head of the Secret Service should immediately be fired.
Yes.
Whoever was responsible for assuring the security of the surrounding area should immediately be fired. However, I will agree with Shaquille that beyond that, we need to do an investigation, find out what happened, who, if anybody else, ought to be held accountable, not only with regard to the Secret Service, but also with regard to the police and other players, okay? But let me come back on something that Shaquille said. I'm glad he brought it up. Look, I have no problem with women being part of the Secret Service, right? I mean, I have no problem with that. But if you're trying to protect a 6'3" man with a 5'4" woman or man, I don't care if they're a woman or a man, that's a little bit of a problem when you're supposed to be the shield, okay? And so I think, we can have women, we can have, more vertically challenged people as part of the Secret Service, but you need to think about what their proper role should be and how they should be assigned. And the height of the person that you're protecting should have something to do with it. By the way, there are lots of people that are protected by the Secret Service that are women. Okay. I mean,
that assumes that she was there to be a shield. I know the bit that you're talking about, but who's to say she wasn't supposed to run point and have the men behind her be the shield?
Hold on. Look at the pictures, Shaquille. Look at the pictures as to who ran the shield, the president. Okay, it was mostly men, but not all. Again, I don't want to go into man, woman. I'm talking about height. Okay, I mean, I know women that are taller than me. Okay, so this is not a male female kind of thing. I think we just need to think about what the proper roles are.
Well, and I think we also need to look at the concern of the other people who were shot. Their families are suffering greatly, and I also looked at the videos in great detail with some colleagues, and just, I counted the shots with them. I measured, based on different videos. We were looking at that and watching how people were covering the president. And, the president was more concerned about standing up and put his thumb up. And I'm sure they were not happy about that. I personally think that my first concern would have been, is anyone else shot? Is everyone okay? Let's go. But he was, as always, Trump, let's get that photo up and then move. Definitely a photo for history. And it just shows his character that, hey, you shot me, I'm not going down. So there you go. I mean, very strong. That's what he is proving here. I'm very sorry to know that a 20-year-old kid got I say he outsmarted the.
This brings me back to the Second Amendment, which I am not a fan of. It was drafted in the 1700s, but and we have really poor gun laws. A universal background check in this case would not work. But here's what would work and should be initiated by Congress: gun insurance. In other words, we have a gun owner who did not lock his gun up properly. We have a gun owner who didn't buy gun insurance. Now, why do we need gun insurance? Because there is a victim here, and it's not really Trump. It's the person who was the fire chief who died. Who's going to pay for his family? Who should pay is the gun owner. And the gun owner should buy gun insurance, and every gun owner should buy gun insurance. So when things like this happen, we can compensate the families. And if the Second Amendment gets in the way of gun insurance, you need to get rid of the Second Amendment and put something reasonable, because the victims are the fire chief's family and the two other people that were killed. And we don't seem to give a rat's rear about them, and the gun owners don't. And they all need to buy gun insurance, just like you buy auto insurance, you buy homeowners insurance. If you own a gun in this country, because it's so widely used for things like this, you need to have gun insurance. So that's my beef.
And so what would happen? Let's think about it in this case. All right. You had a 20-year-old, so he's under 21. He wouldn't have been able to buy it.
His dad did.
Yeah, right.
No,
that's what I'm coming to. That's what I'm coming to. His dad bought it. Didn't have it properly secured.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Obviously didn't have it properly secured. I have no idea what the mental, capacity of this person is and what his life is all about. We'll find that out. But presumably then what would happen is the dad would be held liable, and the insurance that the dad would have had to purchase would have been there to help the family. I got no problem with gun insurance.
What happens?
I have no problems with gun control.
Guns that have been smuggled.
I think mental health control needs to be improved and upped. I agree with David. I think we're demonizing things that don't need to be demonized, and that's a mental health issue. I think that if we improved our mental health control a little bit better. Maybe less people who shouldn't have guns wouldn't have them. But we're dealing with a murder here with my own family situation where some teens got a hold of their parents' gun and shot and killed someone we love dearly. And it should not have happened, but they got their parents' gun. And so you can't, I just don't know how you're going to control it. I mean, it's severe punishment laws in other countries take care of that problem. I just don't know how you would do it here.
Getting
How
back
would
to
the
gun
work for
insurance,
stolen insurance.
getting back to gun
stolen
insurance, I looked up the cost of gun violence in the U.S. and the first source I came to says it's over $500 billion a year. So I don't know if but if you do the math, 450 million guns, $500 billion a year. If you charged like $300 a year per gun for gun insurance, that would defray a lot of the costs of gun violence.
Yeah, I have no problem.
What about stolen guns and
we
guns
need
that are
to do more.
smuggled?
Right. I think we need to do more than that, but I think gun insurance is a good idea. Yeah.
Shaquille.
So I've been saying, what about stolen guns, guns that are smuggled into the country, guns that aren't registered, those sorts of things? Even if you were to make everybody have universal background checks now before they purchase a gun, you've already got a lot of guns that are in the market. So the gun insurance wouldn't necessarily work for those situations.
But it
It's
would
not gonna work for all
just because the
situations.
cows
It'll
are
work
out
for
of the
most.
barn
It's like
doesn't
auto
mean that you
insurance.
burn down the barn.
What happens if you have what they call uninsured auto insurance that takes place? So yeah, it's not going to not everybody carries auto insurance. So what about the one person who's driving a car who's not doesn't have auto insurance?
Hey,
Okay,
Nick,
things
just
like
really
that can
quickly,
happen,
I'd love to hear
but
Dave
you have
go
enough
through
gun
it.
insurance to cover it.
No,
And
but
that's
Nick,
the
just
whole
really
point.
quickly, how would
It
you,
will
and
work.
maybe Dave's got some thoughts as well, how would you regulate the guns as well and everything? Because I am actually, like I said, I don't have any, but I do have family members with guns, and I'm oftentimes shocked. I think on the other show that we were doing, World Edition, I mentioned that I went to an event and the young lady had some interesting conspiracy theories and staged theories about the whole Trump assassination attempt and everything. But she also mentioned, and she could be a military lady for all I know, that she owned guns and that she had gone to the gun range, so she knew a little bit about this particular type of gun and its distance and everything. So it does seem like quite a lot of people. I mean, I'm in an apartment complex with probably several thousand, tens of thousands of people in this apartment complex, and I imagine that if I was to go knock on their doors, probably half of them got guns for all I know and everything. So what can we do if it seems like everybody and their mother and sister has a gun? Matter of fact, I sometimes feel outnumbered because I don't have one.
Well, let me tell you why gun insurance would work. First of all, what Rick just pointed out, it would cost every gun owner $300. And some of these people don't want to spend $300 a year to carry their gun insurance. So someone may be going uninsured, which means
Especially if they have 10 plus guns.
Especially if they have 10 plus guns. You're right, David. And in my younger, more halcyon days, I actually had a whole stack of guns. I mean, from shotguns to 30-30s to semi-automatic 40s to semi-automatic 22s. If I had that arsenal back then, it would cost me $3,000 a year easy to maintain all those guns. And so if you're paying gun insurance, you're paying the true cost. And I had people come over to my place, and this is what I learned, that people don't know how to handle guns. They really do not. Now, David, you're in the military. When you're in the military, they're trained how to handle guns. All my military guys knew how to handle it. But the regular average Joe doesn't even know how to handle a gun. It's really sad. And some accidents could have taken place. It's a very dangerous instrument to have, especially a semi-automatic, 44. I mean, you're talking about things that go pretty fast. The 22 is not so bad because they're little bullets, but some of the 357s, I mean, those are huge bullets. So the thing is, I think what we need to do is we need to bring up some solutions to start mitigating the problem that you have in this country, which is way too many guns and way too many people that don't even know how to handle the guns.
Well,
maybe it should be a tax on bullets.
Maybe people should be able to be required to take some type of training before they can actually buy the gun.
Yeah. The training would also be helpful, but you need to It's just like if you're driving a car.
No, I'm not
you have-
saying I'm not saying in lieu of gun insurance. I'm saying it's a
Yeah, you
sub-
have gun insurance. It's just like a car. Cars are dangerous instruments too. We know that. But you have automobile insurance. You have training. You have registration, and
well, in
it
addition,
mitigates the problem.
the insurance company won't insure you
Yeah,
if you're not a licensed driver, and you can't be a licensed driver unless you pass certain tests.
correct.
Correct.
Okay, smart, intelligent guys who live in their bubble. Are you expecting the criminals who have guns to be paying these insurance and taxes? I mean,
Absolutely.
No.
Absolutely. And if they
You,
don't, they
you,
get
you
their
think
guns
all the criminals out there are going to do that, Nick?
No, but there's people that are uninsured motorists. They're criminals that drive today
Right.
that don't have insurance. But
They're
you know
not
what
gonna
they
pay.
do? Those people you come down on, you take their guns. It could be a criminal violation. You stick their butts in jail. In other words, we change the policy. Just because one bad apple goes south doesn't mean that you don't have a pool of money that can take care of the widow and her children of the person who just died in this. And it isn't Trump. Everybody's going to say, "Oh, poor Trump." It's the guy who was the fire chief. Why aren't we looking at him and his family? Why don't we care about them?
In fairness, I would imagine he probably has life insurance. I don't know how adequate it is, but
they run a GoFundMe. They run a GoFundMe for the victims, and I believe it's
they
already
made
raised
$3 million, maybe 4
million.
million by now for the victims.
That's right.
I mean, which is
I'd like to just bring up a couple of Australian gun laws for you. We have different laws in the different states in relation to this. Yes, you have to have training before you can purchase a gun. Now, I know when I used to be an advanced driving instructor that if you actually did the advanced driving course, you got a reduction on your insurance. So perhaps you could do things like that to keep people going to regular training exercises with their guns. Also, you have to have a safe, and the police have the right, this probably wouldn't work in the United States, but the police actually have the right to randomly inspect your safe to make sure that you've got all the weapons that you're supposed to have in there and that they're securely locked away. So those are some of the things that we've done here. Now, again, that's not going to be necessarily applicable to you guys there, but certainly I would suggest that something has to be done. And one thing I would say is for anybody who looks at the Second Amendment or looks at the Constitution, the way the Founding Fathers intended it, also came with some responsibilities. And I think that a lot of people forget about that.
Yeah, just along those same lines, and so Terry brought up a point to Kim's point and everything. So she was saying that we need to get better mental health, and I've definitely been a big fan of mental health. And we've got a bullying show here on the network, Pod TV, that's every Sunday at 6:00, and all along those lines. So Stephanie and Jean do a great job of talking about this. But I just wondered, has anybody heard since the incident on Saturday as to the whether there was a manifesto or any reasoning behind why this particular gentleman, Mr. Crook, decided to do this attack and all along those lines? Because I haven't heard
nothing's been found yet. But
another victim as well.
not yet.
Nothing's been found yet. But to the viewer's comment, his classmates have said that he was bullied relentlessly at school.
Yeah. But the thing is, if you went to the bullying thing, almost every kid, at least in the United States, I don't know about Australia, at some point in time would be bullied. I mean, now he may have a mental problem, but at the same time, you got a lot of people that are edgy, and there's some that are hard to discover. It's like that person that had the AR-57 in Las Vegas, who was a multimillionaire, just started randomly shooting people. I've looked through his CV, and I didn't see how anyone could determine this person was trending this direction. So no matter how you improve your mental capacity, it's just not going to solve things like this. What could solve it is what David brought up. Secret Service, baby, you need to do a better job.
Yeah. That whole thing could have been prevented if they did their job properly.
The Secret Service has a record of failing. In the first week of the Secret Service, which went on the job in 1865, in the first week, they let Abraham Lincoln get assassinated.
Oh, really? It's the first week.
They're still on work experience at that point, Rick. So maybe
it was a bad week.
Yeah,
but I do want to just point out to Americans that I know a lot of government people all over the world. I see their security detail. Other than specific military details that I will sometimes see, actually security for other world leaders is nowhere near what you have in the United States. And a big part of the reason why is because they don't have the people with the experience. The UK and the US in the Western world do, but outside of them, there's very few people that actually have that kind of experience. And even if you've got military experience, defending a person, that's a very specific type of job.
But we're still not addressing the bigger issue. We're missing the bigger issue. And here's the bigger issue, which Rick brought out. Today, as we're talking, 100 people will be killed by a gun. 50 of them will be committing suicide today as we're talking. And we're not even going to hear about those 50. They're going to be buried in some hospital. And 50 people are going to be shot dead by somebody else in this country, which, by the way, Spain, that would be the entire year. That is just the day in the United States of America. And no politician is addressing it because we run a two-party system who brought us two of the worst candidates you could possibly imagine to run for president of the United States and threw them down our throats. Here's your choice. Okay. And neither one are.
I thought this was a country of the people, by the people,
Yeah,
but
well,
it's not.
It's not. I mean, the thing is,
It's
and they're
not.
not addressing this issue, which
Sad.
is happening every day. Tomorrow, there'll be another 100 people that are going to die, according to Rick's statistics. 50 suicides will take place by guns, and 50 people are going to get murdered, and nobody is addressing any possible solution.
Or how about how many children are abused every day and then killed at home with guns as well? You know,
why aren't they talking about
24
this
million.
Yeah, this should be one of the issues that are brought before the United States. This should be one of the platforms they should be discussing at the RNC.
Trump has gotten $500,000, and he's the leading recipient in contributions this year from the gun lobby.
Hey, speaking of platforms, I heard an interesting comment, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about this. I know that probably everybody here will disagree, but I think I see where the guy was going, and I forget the gentleman's name, but there was a former astronaut that was actually reflecting, I think his name was like Gunnar or something like that, on the whole notion of the way that we view the world and everything, because he was actually thinking that a lot of people, they ask themselves how they're doing economically, and that seems to be the number one issue. And he was actually saying that we might have it backwards and everything, because he was actually going to put, I hate to tell you this, Dave, the economy as third, because he was thinking that we need to look at the entirety of the planet and the climate and all along those lines. And there was something that was the second one, and then the economy came in third, because whatever the order was, it was economy, this other one that I can't remember, and then like the climate and the planet, and he wanted to reverse it and everything, and that came out, I wouldn't believe it was over the weekend and everything. And like I said, he was a well-known or fairly well-known astronaut that went up on one of those recent missions, so he was like thinking that maybe we have it. And of course that's because of his bird's eye view and the way he saw the planet when he was looking down up there from up in space and everything. But does he have a point, or does he not have a point?
That there are threats and perspectives that that get ignored the way we do news. I've been talking about this book, Nuclear War by Annie Jacobson, which shows that our nuclear deterrence structure is just threadbare. That the odds that we could have an accidental big nuclear exchange with another nuclear country are much higher than we would find acceptable if we were aware of them.
Let me jump on. First, every major poll that I've seen has the economy number one, border security and immigration number two, and I think what you're going to find number three is not going to be crime. Okay, it's going to be, it's going to be. Keep in mind Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Self-preservation is the most fundamental, and that has to do with some of the issues we're talking about. The environment is an issue, but it's not a top 5 issue. I was just interviewed right before I got on this by a reporter from Denmark who wanted to talk about who wanted to talk about our financial situation or whatever. And one of the things I told him was, look, of course, they're very environmentally conscious in Denmark, very, very much so. And I said, look, climate change is real. Mankind plays a role in it. We need to do something about it, but we have to be realistic about what can be done and how quickly it can be done. And we also have to understand that we can do everything that we think is right, but if other major countries don't, we will never solve the problem. On the other hand, with regard to our nation's finances, if we don't solve this problem, which only we can do, then the whole world's going to suffer to differing degrees. We've heard the story about if America gets a cold, the world gets the flu. This is going to be a lot worse than the cold. It's going to be a lot worse than the flu. And so we have more than one sustainability problem. Yes, environmental is a sustainability problem, but so is our nation's finances.
So I want to bring up financial literacy, which we talk about a lot, because California, which has almost 1/8 of the U.S. population, now requires a financial literacy course to graduate from high school, joining 35 other states with the same requirement. Now, I'm sure some of the classes in some states are going to suck, but at least we're getting maybe 80% of high school students, if they want to graduate, have to learn at least a little bit about money and how to manage it.
Well, I think that every high school student should take a financial literacy and civic responsibility course before they can graduate from high school. I want to mention something, and maybe you can put a link in. Joe Penland, who's known as Joe from Texas, he and I were together out at the Freedom Fest where we met Bobby Kennedy and others out there. And we've come up with a contract from the American people, which we are pushing to try to get the candidates to focus on solutions to challenges facing America, which, by the way, includes some of the things we're talking about here with regard to crime, with regard to education, with regard to our nation's finances, et cetera. And you can find out about it at joefromtexas.com. joefromtexas.com. It's the contract from the American people. Check it out. If you like it, sign it and share it.
I'll definitely do that. Hey, Jay, just really quickly, the gentleman I was trying to think of was astronaut Ron Garan, Garan, and he said that we need to focus more on important issues like the climate crisis instead of the economy. It's obvious from the vantage point of space that we're living a lie, Garan added. We need to move from thinking economy, society, and planet. So it's society with the second one, to planet, society, and economy. So he was actually going to put economy as the third one in that order, and that's what he was saying, that that's when we're going to continue our evolutionary process. So like I said, he does come at it from the viewpoint of looking at it from the earth, because he says we're not going to have peace on earth until we recognize the basic facts of the interrelated structure of all reality. So that was the quote that was found this weekend that I found interesting. I was curious your thoughts around it.
Right. So if we're going to talk about crime, we should mention that violent crime in America is at 30-year lows. It peaked in the early 90s under the first Bush and Clinton. And it's been dropping since. And some of it is law enforcement, and some of it is, our lives have moved online and nobody carries cash anymore. But it's not the epidemic that certain news outlets would have you believe.
Yeah,
I agree with you on that. There are statistics to show that the crime rates are considerably lower.
hey,
But they are considerably higher in the United States than your peer group, and certainly higher than the other Five Eyes countries.
Right.
I'd like to say to David, as you know, I love the things that you stand for, the things that you try to achieve, and I wish that we were trying to do that here in Australia and in the UK. Do you think that if the other Five Eyes countries, were more economically responsible, that the United States would start to feel like a laggard in its peer, in comparison to its peer group, and then start to do something, or do you think it would have no real difference?
Well, you raise a really good important point, Shaquille, because in my view is you don't really know how well you're doing, whether you're a country, a company, an individual, whatever, unless you know how you're doing as compared to your plan, how you're trending, and how you compare to others. Unfortunately, in the United States, most of our political leaders don't consider the third. They assume that since we're the largest economy, and by the way, that's on nominal dollars, on purchasing power parity, we're number 2 to China, okay? They assume that we've got to be number 1 in about everything, when in reality, we're below average on a number of things, including, or in some cases, we're above average, which is bad, like debt to GDP, right? So it all depends on the metric you're dealing with. And so one of the things I do try to do, and I did that on the call this morning with the reporter from Denmark, is to talk about comparative statistics.
Right.
And on that basis, we're not where we need to be, and we're getting worse. But then again, you have to say, what are you going to do to solve the problem? And I come back and I say three things. You got to have a president that makes it a priority. Right now, we don't have that, and we may run out of have it after the election. Number two, you have to have a constitutional amendment, which many countries have, okay, that limit how much debt you can take on as a percentage of the economy, absent extraordinary circumstances. And thirdly, you've got to have this commission that I talked about that taps the people and engages them, sets the table for a tough vote. Takes those three things. You need all three. And I'm working on all three, and I'll continue to work on all three, because that's how you're going to solve the problem.
Would you consider, because I've brought this up before in relation to pensions, would you consider ending some of the programs that have become too bloated and failed, making sure that they will meet their obligations, but making sure that no new people are enrolled in it? And if we just use the pension example, I've advocated for a privatisation of this field. Would that be something that you would support in relation to other things like the other programs that become bloated?
Well, let me talk in generalities, because you deal with specifics, it gets, one's got to be more careful. Government has grown too big, promised too much, subsidized too many, lost control of the budget, is not managed for outcomes, doesn't link resources to results, and has undercut states' rights. All right? So I'm for a dramatic transformation of government, focused on founding principles. All right? And that means that we need reforms to our social insurance programs, much more on the healthcare side than the pension side, but we need it there too. It means we need to reprioritize and eliminate some cases, consolidate in others, reduce in others. What we're doing with regard to discretionary spending, including defense. There's a huge amount of waste in defense, if you will. So I'm for major transformational reform. And if you've read the book, okay, the people advocate for a two-tier Social Security system, base defined benefit, supplemental individual account. All right. The people think we need to totally relook at the healthcare system, because we've got certain segments of the population that get a lot more and other segments that don't get anything. And yet we've overpromised with regard to that. So we need to really kind of step back, get back to fundamentals, the difference between what's basic and essential and in unlimited individual wants, which you can never satisfy. All right. So, a lot of people say we just need a nip and tuck. We need radical reconstructive surgery in phases. Nip and tuck ain't going to get the job done.
And I've got a question in reforming Social Security, because, that's something that a lot of people were promised. They paid into. Now they're, in fear that there's not going to be enough. So to me, that was somebody who misused our funds. But could there be a program that gives you incentive that if you don't really need it, that maybe you're taxed less on the savings that you do have on the side, and that you're using or forced to use, as opposed to just saying, we're going to take it away or make you wait longer? I mean, is there some incentives?
Well, first, it's a social insurance program, which means it's universal. It is not a traditional insurance program. It is not a traditional investment program, if you will. You have to keep in mind that one of the critical elements to get anything done, whether it's on the spending side, on the tax side, on the regulatory side, if you will, is it politically feasible? Can you pass the House, which generally requires a simple majority? Can you pass the Senate, which generally requires 60 votes unless it's on budget reconciliation? And can you get the signature of the president? There are a lot of things that we can come up with individually that are great ideas, all right, and that may actually be the best way to go or a better way to go. But if it doesn't meet the political feasibility test, it will never pass. And even if it was able to pass, it won't be sustained over time because the margins between the Democrats and the Republicans are so small that what gets passed today may get repealed 2 years from now when somebody else is in control. And so that's the real issue. And you get a lot of these think tanks here in town. Some are on the left, some of them are on the right. Very few are in the sensible center. Okay, which is kind of like what the politics is like, right? I mean, they come up with all these ideas, but a lot of them, frankly, there's no way in hell they're going to happen. Because they don't consider political feasibility, which
brings us back to guns. We would probably never be able to pass gun insurance. I don't see how you make that happen politically.
But the thing is, you have automobile insurance, and the real problem is we don't even have a discussion about it. So without having a discussion, there's no way you can even move the country forward. It's just like Social Security. David, you and I know Social Security and Medicare are in serious trouble, but I talk to clients every day, and it's like, you're kidding. They don't even know that it's in trouble, and they go,
most people I know that it's in trouble.
The federal government will take care of everything. I said, you understand, the federal government is in worse trouble.
No, most people I know will.
I didn't even know that. I didn't know we're 35 trillion.
Agree, Nick.
That's the problem.
What's that insurance company that you guys have in America that's got like a green lizard or something, or a gecko or something?
Geico.
I'm just trying to imagine. I'm just trying to imagine the next time I come to the United States, Nick will have his way, and there'll be some like green lizard thing on everyone's gun as an insurance ad for guns. I can just see it already.
He's going to be holding the automatic weapon, going, "Get your insurance here, folks."
Those are illegal, Tim. Those are illegal.
I know. I'm joking.
Get your gun insurance.
But to Rick's point, and then coming back, as I know we're winding down, there is not, if you're going to use the automobile parallel, I don't know that the gun industry is as strong a lobby as the NRA is. So how are you going to get this passed when you've got the NRA, which has got their hands in a lot of
you have another very
Democrats and Republicans?
You have a very strong group that I used to be affiliated with. It's called the insurance lobby. And the insurance lobby, I hate to tell you, Mark, is a lot stronger than the gun lobby. So once they get a hold of the gun insurance idea, let me tell you something, there will be gun insurance.
All they've got to do is give some money to the NRA, and then NRA will support them.
That's my point.
Well, one concern I do want to point out real quick, and I know we have 1 minute, is in all of this, the media has made a big point of making sure that they label and identify each victim and the shooter as to what party they belong to. And I think we need to stop that. We need to stop the labeling. I don't think it matters who or what party they belong to. I think we're humans, and we need to get back to that factor. And I was deeply appalled by them saying, oh, he was Republican, he was Democrat, but
Let me mention one thing real quick before we go. I was just told by one of Kennedy's leading people that the latest poll says that 51% of registered voters are now independent.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
There you go. So am I. Bye-bye.
Bye.